Have you ever felt like you don't quite belong to your generation? Like you're observing life from a different perspective than everyone around you? Like you've already lived 1,000 lifetimes before you were even born? If you're nodding right now, this video is for you. Welcome back to channel. We're exploring a concept that Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung spent decades studying: the old soul. But specifically, we're diving deep into what it means to be a woman with an old soul, and the 12 unmistakable signs that reveal this profound spiritual maturity. Now, Carl Jung believed that some individuals carry what he called an ancient consciousness, a wisdom that transcends age, experience, and even time itself. For women, this manifests in incredibly specific and beautiful ways that we're about to unpack. By the end of this video, you'll not only understand if you have an old soul, but you'll also gain clarity on why you've always felt different, and why that's actually your greatest strength. So, if you've ever wondered if there's something more to you than meets the eye, stick around. This is the deeper answer you've been searching for. Let's get started. Section 1. Understanding Old Souls. What is an old soul? The Jungian perspective. Before we explore the 12 signs, we need to understand what Carl Jung actually meant by an old soul. Jung was a pioneer in modern psychology, and he introduced the concept of the collective unconscious, the idea that all humans share a deep, universal layer of consciousness. Within this framework, he observed that some people seem to access this collective wisdom more easily than others. He called these individuals old souls. An old soul isn't necessarily someone who has lived many physical lifetimes, though some spiritual traditions believe that. Instead, in Jungian psychology, an old soul is someone who has accessed deep psychological and spiritual maturity. They've integrated wisdom, shadow work, and self-awareness in a way that typically takes decades or even a lifetime to achieve. Yet they seem to have been born with this knowing. For women specifically, Jung noted something fascinating. Women with old souls tend to embody what he called the wise woman archetype. This isn't about being old, or even experienced in the traditional sense. It's about carrying an inner knowing, a connection to the deeper mysteries of life, psychology, and human nature. Jung believed that in modern society, we've largely lost touch with this wisdom. We're disconnected from intuition, from nature, from the shadow self, and from the deeper currents of the human psyche. Women with old souls, he suggested, somehow maintained this connection. They never fully surrendered to surface-level living. Think of it this way. While their peers are obsessed with trends, status, and external validation, a woman with an old soul is quietly asking, "But what does this all mean? What's real beneath the surface?" That difference in focus isn't a personality quirk. It's a fundamental difference in consciousness. Why we're talking about this now? In our current era of social media, constant distraction, and manufactured authenticity, the concept of the old soul has become increasingly relevant and increasingly misunderstood. Some people throw the term around casually. "Oh, I'm an old soul because I like vintage coffee shops and read Bukowski." That's not what Jung was describing. The genuine old soul, the kind we're exploring today, is rare. She's the woman who seems to see through the illusions of her time. She asks difficult questions. She's comfortable with ambiguity and paradox. She has a quiet inner authority that doesn't need external validation. And here's what's important to understand. If you are this kind of woman, your whole life might have felt like you're swimming against the current, that you're broken, that you're antisocial, that there's something wrong with you because you don't fit neatly into the boxes society has prepared. This video is here to tell you, nothing is wrong with you. You're simply wired differently, and that wiring is a gift. Section 2, the 12 signs. Sign 1, she sees through social masks. Let's begin with the first sign. A woman with an old soul can see through the social masks people wear. In Jungian psychology, Jung talked extensively about what he called the persona, the mask we show the world. We all have one. It's necessary, actually. We can't show our authentic selves all the time. Society demands a certain performance, but most people become unconscious of their persona. They believe the mask is who they really are. A woman with an old soul, however, can see through this. She notices when someone is performing rather than being. She can sense the gap between a person's public face and their private reality, and she recognizes this dynamic in herself too. This might look like she sits in a crowded room and feels profoundly alone, not because she's socially inept, but because she's seeing the gap between what people are projecting and who they actually are. She quickly loses interest in small talk, not because she's rude, but because there's a hunger for depth. That surface-level conversation simply doesn't satisfy. She can sense when someone is lying, not necessarily through obvious tells, but through an intuitive knowing. It's like she's reading a deeper layer of communication. She finds most social media exhausting to consume because she's hyper-aware of how curated and performative it all is. Now, here's the challenge with this sign. She can feel isolated by it. Everyone around her seems to be accepting the surface, playing the game, and she's sitting there seeing the real. That can feel lonely, and sometimes it makes her doubt herself. Am I being too cynical? Am I overthinking this? But Jung would say no. She's simply more conscious. She's less hypnotized by the collective illusion. The invitation here is to use this gift without judgment. You can see through masks while still respecting people's need to wear them. Sign 2. She's deeply intuitive and trusts her inner knowing. The second sign is that she possesses a profound intuition that goes beyond normal instinct. Now everyone has intuition. But a woman with an old soul has cultivated a relationship with her intuition. That's almost supernatural. Carl Jung called this the feminine principle of feeling function. And here's what's crucial. He didn't mean emotion. He meant a direct knowing that bypasses rational thought. It's a form of perception. For women with old souls, this intuition works like this. She knows something will happen before it does. Not just lucky guesses. She'll suddenly have a strong feeling to text someone, and they call 2 minutes later. She'll avoid a particular route and later learns there was an accident on that road. She'll meet someone and instantly know their character, sometimes in contradiction to what they're presenting. She can walk into a room and immediately sense the emotional climate. She knows when someone is suffering, even if they're hiding it perfectly. She can feel when a relationship is about to shift, sometimes long before the person verbally communicates it. She trusts this knowing even when it doesn't make rational sense. And here's the thing, this intuition is usually right. Jung believed that this was connected to what he called the collective unconscious. She's tapping into a deeper layer of knowing that transcends individual experience. She's accessing archetypal patterns. But again, there's a shadow side to this. In a rationalist culture, she's often invalidated. People tell her, "You're just overthinking it." Oh, that's not logical. So many old soul women have learned to distrust this gift. They've been gaslit so many times that they second-guess their own knowing. The reclamation here is simple. If your intuition keeps being right, it's not because you're lucky. You're accessing a real form of knowledge. Trust it, and surround yourself with people who respect this capacity rather than dismiss it. Sign 3. She's a natural psychologist or therapist. The third sign is that people naturally open up to her, and she has an almost innate understanding of human psychology. This is something I've noticed repeatedly with old soul women. They seem to have a built-in PhD in human nature. Without formal training, she understands psychological concepts. She can listen to someone describe their problem and immediately recognize the underlying pattern, the repetitive story, the limiting belief, the childhood wound that's still running the show. People tell her things they've never told anyone. Strangers on planes, acquaintances at parties, her friends' exes. There's something about her presence that makes people feel safe, enough to reveal their true selves. Often she's found herself in the role of therapist, even as a child. She was the one her friends confided in. She was the one her parents came to with their problems. Even though she was the child, she's the person family members cry to because they sense she won't judge them. This is connected to what Jung called the containing function. She has the psychological capacity to hold complexity. She doesn't pathologize. She doesn't immediately try to fix someone. She can sit with someone's pain and fear and confusion without flinching or trying to make it go away. But here's where it gets tricky. Without healthy boundaries, she becomes everyone's dumping ground. She absorbs other people's emotions and problems. She doesn't have permission to say no. She loses herself in the service of others' healing. The work here is to recognize this gift and then set firm boundaries around it. She can be deeply empathetic and compassionate while also protecting her own psyche. In fact, that's essential. She can't pour from an empty cup, and the world doesn't need another burned-out caretaker. If this is you, your empathy and understanding are superpowers. But they come with a responsibility to yourself first. Sign 4, she feels everything intensely. Sign 4, she experiences emotions with an intensity that can be overwhelming. This isn't being too sensitive or too emotional, two dismissive labels that have been weaponized against women for centuries. This is about having a nervous system that's finely tuned to emotional and energetic stimuli. A woman with an old soul often feels things at a depth that others don't naturally access. She might cry at a beautiful piece of music, not because she's weak, but because she can feel the human longing, the spiritual yearning embedded in it. She gets overwhelmed in crowded places, not because she's antisocial, but because she's absorbing the emotional energy of everyone around her. It's like she has psychic antennae that pick up on undercurrents. She feels disconnected from people who seem unaffected by suffering in the world. How can they watch the news and remain unmoved? How can they see injustice and feel no urgency? She experiences her own emotions as whole-body experiences. Grief isn't just a thought, it's a physical sensation that moves through her. Joy isn't just a mental state, it elevates her entire being. Jung would call this related to what he termed emotional consciousness, or feeling type. But I want to reframe it in a broader way. She's simply more conscious of the emotional and energetic dimensions of existence. The danger here is that society will pathologize this as anxiety, depression, or emotional dysregulation. She might be put on medications, told to toughen up, or encouraged to numb herself. The reframing is crucial. This depth of feeling is her gift. It means she can access the sacred. It means she can love deeply, be loved. That's the greatest love you can offer. Before I wrap up, I want to say something that Jung emphasized repeatedly. The journey of becoming conscious is never complete. There's no destination where you arrive and suddenly you're a perfect, fully actualized being. Consciousness is an ongoing process. It's a spiral, not a line. You circle back to old issues, but each time you're at a higher level of consciousness about them. Old soul women sometimes have the expectation that they should already know everything, that they should have it all figured out because they're old souls. That's a trap. An authentic old soul consciousness is humble. It knows how much it doesn't know. It remains forever curious, forever questioning, forever willing to be wrong. So release the idea that you need to be a finished product. You're in process. We all are. And the beauty is in the unfolding. One more thing. Be kind to yourself. The path of consciousness is not for the faint of heart. It requires courage. It requires willingness to face darkness, both in yourself and in the world. It requires staying present when you want to escape. It requires showing up again and again and again. If you're doing that work, if you're committed to becoming more conscious, to integrating your shadow, to living authentically, to serving something larger than yourself, you're a hero. That's not an exaggeration. In a world that constantly encourages sleep and forgetfulness, staying awake is an act of courage. So honor yourself, honor the difficulty of this path, and know that you're not alone. There are more of us awake now than ever before. And we're recognizing each other. We're finding each other. We're creating new communities based on consciousness, rather than proximity or circumstance. Your old soul nature is both a gift and a burden, but it's your unique gift, and the world needs it. Thank you for taking this journey with me. Thank you for staying curious. Thank you for being willing to question and explore and become more conscious. If this resonated with you, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. Which of these signs spoke to you most? What has been your experience of being an old soul? Share your story. And if you know an old soul woman, share this video with her. Give her the gift of recognition. Let her know that there's a name for what she is, that it's not a flaw, and that her consciousness is valued. Subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. We explore these deep topics regularly. Carl Jung's psychology, consciousness, spiritual development, and what it means to live authentically in this modern world. Thank you for being here. Namaste. It means she can create art, music, writing, or any form of expression with profound authenticity. But she needs to learn to regulate this intensity. She needs tools for grounding. She needs to understand that feeling everything doesn't mean acting on everything. She needs to integrate her intense inner world with practical self-care. If this is you, your sensitivity isn't a flaw. It's evidence that you're awake to dimensions of existence most people are sleepwalking through. Sign 5. She questions authority and conventional wisdom. Sign 5. She has a built-in skepticism toward authority and conventional wisdom. This is a big one, and it often starts very young. Old soul women are the kids who asked, "But why?" in a way that made authority figures uncomfortable. She doesn't blindly accept what she's told, whether it's by religion, science, parents, teachers, or society. This isn't defiance. It's discernment. There's a difference. She'll listen to an expert, and while others nod along, she's silently asking, "But what's the bias here? What's the agenda? What are they not saying? What does my own direct experience suggest?" She's the girl who questioned the religious narrative even as a child. She's the woman who reads the studies behind the statistics. She's the one who says, "I don't think we should do it just because everyone else does it." This makes her very difficult to manipulate. Marketing doesn't work on her the way it works on others. She sees through the psychological tactics. Propaganda doesn't land. Shame doesn't control her, not entirely anyway. Jung believed that this kind of questioning, consciousness was essential for psychological development. He called it individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are rather than who society expects you to be. But this trait has a shadow side, too. She can become cynical. She can start to distrust everything, including her own direct knowing. She can become so focused on seeing through manipulation that she becomes paralyzed, unable to commit to anything. There's also the social cost. People don't always appreciate being questioned. Authority figures find her threatening. In many contexts, family, religious institutions, corporate environments, her questioning is labeled as insubordination, rebellion, or disrespect. The integration here is to maintain her discernment while also respecting that. Authority sometimes has value. She can question and respect simultaneously. She can be a critical thinker without becoming cynical. She can honor direct experience without dismissing all structure. Sign 6. She gravitates towards solitude and introspection. Sign 6. She genuinely prefers solitude to constant social engagement. This isn't social anxiety. This isn't shyness or antisocial personality. This is something different. She loves deeply. She can be charming and present in social situations. But she genuinely needs, significant time alone to process, integrate, and just be. When she's alone, she feels most like herself. Her mind wanders to big questions. She contemplates life, death, meaning, existence. She creates, she dreams, she reflects. After social interaction, even positive social interaction, she needs recovery time. Time away from the energy of others. Time to return to her own center. This isn't because others drain her, though. If she's absorbing everyone's emotions, yes, it can feel that way. It's because she has a rich inner world that requires attention. Constant external engagement pulls her away from herself. Jung talked about this in terms of extroversion versus introversion, but more deeply, he understood that consciousness itself requires solitude. You can't integrate experience while you're constantly being stimulated. You can't hear your own wisdom if you're always listening to others. For old soul women, this need for solitude is often quite pronounced. She might be introverted by nature, or she might be naturally social but still require significant alone time. Either way, the rhythm is presence with others, followed by deep withdrawal and renewal. The challenge is that modern culture celebrates constant connection and availability. Being alone is often pathologized as loneliness. Taking time for yourself is labeled selfish. So many old soul women feel guilty for needing solitude. They wonder if there's something wrong with them. They force themselves into social obligation and compromise their own well-being, trying to fit a model that isn't authentic to them. Here's the truth. Her solitude is sacred. It's where she integrates. It's where she listens to her own knowing. It's where she reconnects to her authentic self. Protecting this time isn't selfish. It's essential maintenance of her psychological and spiritual health. And when she does engage socially, she's far more present and authentic because she's not running on empty. If this is you, your need for solitude is a sign of your depth, not a deficit. Sign 7. She has a deep connection to nature and the sacred. Sign 7. She experiences nature and the divine in a way that transcends religiosity. This is beautiful. She might step outside after a storm and feel the presence of something sacred. Not necessarily God in a religious sense, though it could be. More precisely, she feels connected to something greater than herself. She's the woman who is moved to tears by a sunset. Not because it's aesthetically pretty, though it is, but because she feels something profound. A presence, a meaning, a reminder of what's real beneath the constructs of civilization. She feels at home in nature in a way others don't quite understand. A walk in the forest isn't exercise for her. It's a spiritual practice. She returns from nature feeling restored at a cellular level. She has reverence for the earth. She's likely concerned about environmental destruction, not just intellectually, but emotionally and spiritually. She feels the pain of the planet. She may or may not practice organized religion, but she has a spiritual orientation. She senses that there are dimensions beyond what we can see and measure. She respects mystery. She's comfortable with paradox. Jung himself was fascinated by the numinous, the experience of something sacred and powerful. He didn't dismiss it as imagination or delusion. He saw it as a real encounter with the transpersonal dimension of existence. For women with old souls, this connection to the sacred through nature is often their primary spiritual practice. Not prayer in a traditional sense, but direct communion, direct knowing that something sacred exists. The risk here is that in a secular rationalist culture, she might feel isolated in this knowing. She might be pathologized as superstitious or unscientific. She might suppress this sacred dimension and lose connection to something vitally important. But the truth is, her experience of the sacred is not delusional. She's accessing something real. And in a world that has become increasingly disconnected from the spiritual dimension of existence, her connection is not only valid, it's crucial. This is her reminder, and ours. We are part of something sacred, and reconnecting to that is essential for individual and collective healing. Sign 8. She has experienced significant psychological or spiritual transformation. Sign 8. She has undergone profound inner transformation, often multiple times. One of the hallmarks of an old soul woman is that her life is marked by what Jung called initiations. These aren't always pleasant. In fact, they're often devastating. These might look like a profound loss that shattered her worldview, a health crisis that forced her to reevaluate everything, a betrayal that broke her open, a spiritual awakening that was disorienting and terrifying. A dark night of the soul where nothing made sense. What's unique is how she moves through these experiences. She doesn't just survive them, she integrates them. She allows them to transform her at a fundamental level. After each crisis or awakening, she's different. Not just in her beliefs, but in her actual consciousness. She's updated her operating system, so to speak. A woman without this old soul quality might experience the same crisis and become hardened, bitter, cynical, or traumatized. An old soul woman experiences the crisis and emerges more conscious, more compassionate, more alive. Jung called this the transcendent function, the psyche's capacity to integrate opposites and create new consciousness from crisis. Not everyone accesses this capacity naturally, but old soul women seem to. This doesn't mean she's unaffected by suffering. She's not above pain or fear. But she has an innate ability to alchemize suffering into wisdom, to transform crisis into initiation. The challenge is that while she's moving through these transformations, she can feel very isolated. The people around her might not understand what's happening. They might try to comfort her or fix her in ways that actually interrupt the process. And sometimes after the transformation, she's fundamentally different from her community in ways that create distance or even rejection. But this is how she grows. This is how she becomes who she's meant to be. If you're currently in one of these transformations, trust the process. You're not breaking. You're being remade. And what you'll become on the other side will be worth it. Sign 9. She feels like an outsider, even in her own family. Sign 9. She often feels like an outsider, even in her own family. This is one of the most poignant signs, because it speaks to a deep loneliness that can persist even in intimate relationships. She might have grown up in a loving family and still feel like she doesn't quite belong, like she was dropped into the wrong family by mistake, like she has a different way of seeing the world than everyone around her. Her siblings don't understand her. Her parents are baffled by her. She hears stories about family traditions or values, and she thinks, but that doesn't make sense to me. I don't experience the world that way. This isn't about being rebellious or ungrateful. It's a genuine mismatch in consciousness or orientation. She might have deep love for her family, but there's a fundamental gap in understanding. Jung would say she's individuating. She's becoming herself, which means she's differentiating from the family matrix. And differentiation always involves some degree of separation and loneliness. But what's important to understand is that this feeling of being an outsider often extends beyond just her immediate family. She feels it in her peer groups, in her romantic relationships, in her work environments. There's often a sense of being slightly out of sync with collective reality. The gift of this, if it can be called that, is that she's not enmeshed in collective unconsciousness. She's conscious. And consciousness comes with a price, alienation. But it also comes with freedom. Because she's not defined by the collective, she has the freedom to define herself. She's not as susceptible to peer pressure or groupthink. The work here is to stop fighting the feeling of being an outsider and instead find her true community, her soul family, if you will. People who understand her frequency, people who share her depth and her way of seeing. One of the beautiful things that happens as an old soul woman matures is that she stops trying to fit into her original family or community's expectations, and she creates a family of choice, a circle of people who truly know her. If you're feeling like an outsider, the invitation isn't to change yourself to fit in. The invitation is to find the people where you naturally fit or create them. Sign 10. She's drawn to depth work. Psychology, spirituality, and philosophy. Sign 10. She has an insatiable appetite for understanding the depths of human nature and existence. She's not satisfied with surface-level answers. She wants to know what's real, what's true, what lies beneath the visible world. You might find her library filled with books on psychology, spirituality, philosophy, mysticism, and human nature. She reads Jung and Rumi and Krishnamurti and Thich Nhat Hanh. She listens to podcasts about consciousness and neuroscience and sacred traditions. She's endlessly curious about how the human psyche actually works. She's drawn to depth work, whether that's therapy, shadow work, energy work, or spiritual practice. She understands intuitively that transformation requires going deep. No surface-level solutions for her. She might have a meditation practice, or she might engage in contemplative prayer, or she might spend hours in nature as a form of inquiry. Whatever the form, there's a commitment to inner work. She's not interested in self-help in a materialistic sense. How to make more money or how to get the guy. She's interested in how do I become more conscious? And what is my shadow trying to teach me? And what does it mean to live an authentic life? She asks big questions. Who am I really? Why am I here? What is the nature of consciousness? How do we create meaning? What happens after we die? These aren't abstract questions for her. They're pressing inquiries that feel necessary for her to explore. Jung would recognize this immediately. This is the mark of someone engaged in what he called the great work, the project of becoming conscious. integrating the shadow and actualizing one's true self. The challenge is that this orientation can feel obsessive to others. People might tell her she's overthinking, being too introspective, spiritually bypassing her actual life. They might question why she spends so much energy on internal work when she should be focused on external success. But the truth is, the internal work is the real work. The external success that comes without internal development is hollow. If this is you, your hunger for depth is not a neurosis. It's a calling. Your soul is asking you to become conscious, and you're listening. Sign 11, she understands the concept of shadow and integration. Sign 11. She recognizes and respects the shadow, both in herself and in others. This is advanced psychological consciousness, and it's a hallmark of old soul development. For those who aren't familiar, Jung's shadow refers to the parts of ourselves we deny, repress, or project onto others. The anger we say we don't have, the sexual desire we call inappropriate, the ambition we label selfish, the grief we should be over by now. Most people spend their entire lives fighting their shadow, denying it, or projecting it onto others and blaming them for having the very qualities they won't acknowledge in themselves. A woman with an old soul, however, understands that integration of the shadow is essential. She knows that when she sees something she deeply judges in another person, it's usually because that quality exists in her too, and she's rejected it. She's willing to look at her own darkness, her capacity for cruelty, her selfishness, her fear, her jealousy, her desperation. Not to beat herself up about it, but to understand it, to integrate it, to reclaim the energy that was locked up in denying it. This makes her remarkably compassionate. Because she's done shadow work, she doesn't judge others for their flaws. She sees the shadow in others and recognizes it as human, as understandable, as the result of wounding and survival strategies. She might work with a therapist who understands shadow work. She might engage in journaling or ritual to consciously integrate repressed aspects. She might read about psychology and recognize herself in the case studies. Jung said the goal of psychological development isn't to become perfect and eliminate the shadow. The goal is to become conscious of the shadow and integrate it. This actually makes you more whole, more human, and paradoxically more ethical. The risk here is spiritual bypassing. Some spiritual communities want to focus only on the light and positive, thinking and deny the shadow entirely. An old soul woman rejects this. She knows that true spirituality means integrating all parts of ourselves, including the dark. She also refuses to moralize about human nature. She understands that people do harmful things because of wounding, fear, and unconsciousness, not because they're inherently evil. This compassion doesn't mean excusing harm, but it means understanding it. And understanding is the first step toward healing. If this is you, your willingness to look at your own shadow and the shadow in others is one of your greatest gifts. It's evidence of real wisdom. Sign 12, she carries an inexplicable sense of knowing. And finally, sign 12, she carries an inexplicable sense of knowing about life and existence. This is hard to put into words, but it's one of the most distinctive marks of an old soul. It's not that she has all the answers. Actually, the opposite. She knows that all the big questions don't have simple answers. She's comfortable with ambiguity and paradox in a way that others find unsettling. But she has an underlying knowing, like she's lived before, even if she doesn't consciously believe in reincarnation. Like she's seen this all before, like there's a part of her that's ancient. When she encounters spiritual truths or psychological insights, she doesn't need to be convinced. She recognizes them immediately as true. It's recognition, not learning. She might read something by Jung or a mystic poet or a spiritual teacher, and immediately think, yes, I already knew this. I just forgot. It's familiarity disguised as novelty. She has a sense that there's a larger pattern to her life, that the challenges she's faced, the people she's met, the countries she's lived in, it all means something. It's not random. There's an underlying purpose or direction that she can sometimes perceive. Jung called this the experience of meaningful coincidence or synchronicity. Events that are causally unrelated but are meaningfully connected. The old soul woman experiences these regularly, and they reinforce her sense that there's an intelligence behind existence. She also has a quiet knowing about death. Not in a morbid way, but she's made peace with mortality. In a way others haven't. She doesn't fear death because she has an intuitive knowing that consciousness doesn't end, that there's something beyond the physical body. This knowing isn't based on provable belief. It's experiential. It's felt. It's known at a deep level. The danger is that this knowing can be challenged by a rationalist world. She might be told she's being naive, spiritual, unprovable, and if she's not grounded in herself, she might start to doubt her own direct knowing. But here's what I want to say clearly. Her knowing is valid. Just because something can't be measured by modern science doesn't mean it's not real. There are dimensions of existence that transcend the material. If you have this knowing, honor it. Don't let anyone rationalize you out of your own experience. These are the 12 signs. Now let me ask, how many of these resonated with you? Section 3, Integration and Shadow Work. The shadow side of being an old soul. Now I want to be honest about something. Being an old soul comes with real challenges, and I think it's important to name them rather than romanticize this path. First, there's the alienation we already talked about, the feeling of not belonging. This can manifest as depression, anxiety, and a persistent sense of being wrong or broken. Second, there's the tendency toward isolation and disconnection. In the attempt to maintain psychological integrity, an old soul woman might withdraw too much. She might become hermetic. She might disconnect from the very relationships and community that could nourish her. Third, there's the burden of perception. Seeing through illusions is exhausting. Knowing what others are lying about, sensing the shadow in situations. It can lead to despair or cynicism if not properly integrated. Fourth, there's the potential for spiritual arrogance. I'm more evolved than these people. I understand things they don't. This is the ego claiming the old soul identity and using it to justify superiority. Real old soul consciousness is humble. It knows how much it doesn't know. Fifth, there's the pattern of attracting people who want to be healed by her. Damaged people, charismatic narcissists, people in crisis. Because she has that witnessing, containing presence, they unconsciously seek her out, and she, wanting to help, gets stuck in savior dynamics. Sixth, there's the possibility of spiritual bypassing, using spiritual concepts to avoid dealing with practical life, focusing so much on the inner world that the outer world falls apart. It's all illusion anyway, becomes an excuse for not taking care of basic responsibilities. And finally, there's the challenge of finding or building a life that works for her. Old soul consciousness often doesn't fit well into conventional structures. Career paths, relationships, family expectations, societal timelines. She has to be a trailblazer. And that requires more courage than those following the beaten path. So being an old soul is not simply about having special gifts. It's about navigating a genuinely difficult terrain with grace and consciousness, reclaiming the gift. But here's what I want you to know. These challenges are not failures. They're invitations. The alienation is inviting you to find your true community. The burden of perception is inviting you to develop discernment and wisdom. The isolation is inviting you to learn the difference between healthy solitude and unhealthy withdrawal. The challenges are the very terrain on which real consciousness develops. Carl Jung spent decades studying what he called individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are. And he discovered something crucial. This process is not easy. It requires sacrifice. It requires saying no to collective approval. It requires standing alone sometimes. But the alternative is to remain asleep, to continue performing, to keep betraying yourself to fit in. And I believe, based on everything we've explored today, that an old soul woman cannot do that. The very nature of her consciousness won't allow it. She might try, but there will always be a part of her that's calling her home to herself. So the real work is not to fix yourself or become more normal. The real work is to accept and integrate this fundamental nature, to stop fighting it, to use it in service of something meaningful. This might look like seeking out mentorship or therapy with someone who understands this depth. A regular therapist might pathologize what's actually evidence of consciousness. Find someone who gets it. Creating structures in your life that honor your needs, solitude, depth work, meaningful connection, spiritual practice. Don't wait for permission. Build the life that works for your soul, developing what I call conscious relationship with your old soul nature. Not identifying with it as your entire identity, but recognizing it as one dimension of who you are. You're not only your old soul nature, you're also human. You have a body. You have practical needs. You exist in time and space, finding your people, your soul family, the ones who don't need you to explain yourself, the ones who recognize the frequency you're operating at, committing to ongoing psychological and spiritual development. This isn't something you complete. It's a lifelong inquiry, using your consciousness in service. This is crucial. Old soul women often feel purposeless because they're not oriented toward conventional success markers. But if you reframe your purpose as becoming more conscious and serving the evolution of consciousness on the planet, suddenly there's deep purpose everywhere. This might not look like a prestigious career. It might look like being the person in your community who holds space for others. Transformation. It might look like raising conscious children. It might look like creative expression. It might look like deep friendship. It might look like writing or teaching or art or activism or simply living authentically in an inauthentic world. The point is, your old soul nature isn't a personal problem to overcome. It's a gift to be received and developed. Section 4, Real-World Application. For the woman who recognizes herself. If multiple signs resonated with you, I want to offer some practical guidance. First, stop trying to be normal. I mean this with love and directness. The amount of energy you're probably spending trying to fit in, trying to be like other people, trying to like what others like, it's exhausting. And it's failing anyway because you're wired differently. What if you stopped that project? What if you gave yourself permission to be exactly as strange, as deep, as questioning, as intuitive as you actually are? This doesn't mean being rude or inconsiderate. It means releasing the belief that something is wrong with you. Second, develop practices that ground you in your body and in the present moment. Old soul consciousness can be very mental and very otherworldly. Your body needs attention. Your nervous system needs regulation. Consider yoga, dance, martial arts, time in nature, breath work. These aren't luxuries. They're essential medicine. Third, set boundaries around emotional labor. You don't owe anyone your wisdom, your listening, your witnessing. You can be compassionate without carrying everyone's burdens. Practice saying, I'm not able to help with that right now, and meaning it. Fourth, find or create structures that support your development. This might be a spiritual community, a meditation group, a therapy relationship, a writing circle, a mastermind group. You need to be around people who understand this depth. Fifth, invest in your own growth. Read, study, attend workshops or retreats. Engage with mentors. This isn't indulgence. It's honoring your own nature. Sixth, be gentle with yourself about the alienation. You're not broken. You're not wrong. You're simply in a different frequency. And that's okay. Grieve what needs to be grieved. The family you were born into. The community you can't fully join, but don't let the grief turn into bitterness. Seventh, pay attention to your creations. Old soul women often don't share their creative work because they don't feel it's good enough or they're uncertain about its value. But your perspective, your way of seeing, your voice is needed in this world. Find ways to express it. And finally, remember that being an old soul doesn't exempt you from the human experience. You still need love. You still need rest. You still have a body that gets tired. You still need community. You still need pleasure and play and lightness. Integration means honoring all parts of yourself, the wise, ancient part, and the human, vulnerable, needing part. Both are real. Both matter. For those confused about relationship with an old soul woman, if you're watching this because someone you love is an old soul woman, and you're trying to understand her, I want to offer some guidance, too. She's not being difficult when she questions things. She's being conscious. Support that. She's not being antisocial when she needs solitude. She's being authentic. Respect that. She's not being cold when she won't force connection that doesn't feel genuine. She's being honest. Appreciate that. She's not broken. She's awake. And yes, that can be disorienting to be around, but it's also beautiful. What she needs from you is acceptance, Not the kind of acceptance that says, I tolerate your weirdness. The kind that says, I see who you are, and that's exactly what I love about you. She needs to be able to be herself without having to apologize for her depth, her questions, or her need for authenticity. If you're her partner, recognize that her standards for intimacy are high. She won't stay in a relationship that's superficial. She'll ask for depth that makes you uncomfortable sometimes. But if you're willing to go there, the relationship will be transformative. If you're her friend, she'll be loyal in ways most people don't understand. She'll see you. She'll know things about you that you haven't even told her. She'll be there for your transformation, even when others have written you off. If you're her family, you might never fully understand her, but you can accept that she's different, and you can honor that difference rather than pathologize it. The greatest gift you can give an old soul woman is to stop asking her to be normal and to celebrate what makes her beautifully, mysteriously, profoundly herself. Section 5, Closing and Call to Action. The bigger picture, why this matters now. I want to step back for a moment and talk about why the concept of the old soul matters now, in 2025 more than ever. Our world is facing unprecedented challenges: climate change, social fragmentation, political polarization, mental health crises, meaning deficits. We need consciousness more than we've ever needed it. We need people who can see through illusions. We need people who can feel the deeper currents. We need people who are willing to ask hard questions. We need people who understand that outer change requires inner transformation. Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." We're living in a world of collective unconsciousness. Most people are sleepwalking through existence, reacting from conditioning, trapped in patterns they don't even recognize. Old soul women, by their very nature, are not asleep. They're calling themselves and others to consciousness. They're refusing to participate in the collective delusion. They're asking, is there more? Is there something deeper? Is there a better way? This is not a luxury. This is an absolute necessity for the continuation of civilization as we know it. So, if you're an old soul woman, you're not weird. You're not broken. You're needed. Your consciousness is essential. Your perspective is vital. Your way of seeing is part of what this world needs right now. The alienation you've felt, the sense of not belonging. It's not because something is wrong with you. It's because the world hasn't yet evolved to the level of consciousness that you're naturally operating at. But that's changing. More and more people are waking up. More and more people are asking the questions you've been asking. More and more people are recognizing that the old paradigms aren't working. And that means there's increasing space for your voice, your vision, your way of being. You are not ahead of your time in a way that means you'll be recognized after you die. You're ahead of your time in a way that means you get to be part of the conscious evolution that's happening right now. So here's what I'm inviting you to do, depending on where you are. If you identified strongly with these signs and you're ready to own your old soul nature this week, do something radical, something that honors who you really are rather than who you think you should be. Maybe that's finally starting that creative project. Maybe that's having the authentic conversation you've been avoiding. Maybe that's setting a boundary you've been too scared to set. Maybe that's simply spending a day in solitude without guilt. Whatever it is, do it, and notice how it feels. If you're just beginning to recognize these signs in yourself, I invite you to do some deeper exploration. Sit with the question, how has this old soul nature shown up in my life? Journal about it. Meditate on it. Notice which signs resonated most deeply. If you're confused or skeptical, that's okay. Keep listening. Keep questioning. That's exactly what an old soul does. And if you discover that you resonate with these qualities, the invitation stands. And if you're someone who loves an old soul woman, do something special for her this week. Tell her that you see her consciousness. Tell her that you respect her questions and her need for depth. Tell her that her sensitivity and intuition are gifts.